girls, we're going to start our lesson on multiplying integers. But before we get into it, I want to talk about negative numbers. So we have already talked about what negative numbers are, and we have already added and subtracted negative numbers. But I want you to see negative number in a different way, or another way of understanding negative numbers. So let's think about a number like negative 3. So I know if I ask you to locate this in the number line, you know how to do it. But before getting to negative 3, let's think about 3. Okay, so if I draw the number line and start with 0, I'm going to write the positive numbers with blue. So 1, 2, 3, and the negative numbers with green, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. We know that for every positive number, there is a negative number, right? And we know that this goes forever in both sides. So our number line, usually a correct number line, will have arrows at the end just to symbolize that this number line goes forever. And in the middle is our 0. That's what divides the positive side from the negative side. Agree? So if I want to locate this 3 in the number line, I'll place it here. Agree? So here is my 3. Now, my negative 3 is on the other side. Now, let's think about something with this 3. I want you to remember when we were doing factors last year and we were talking about 3. 3 is a prime number and it has 2 factors, which are 3 and 1, because 1 is a factor of all numbers, agree? Of all whole numbers. So 1 and 3 are the 2 factors of 3. What about negative 3? What about negative 3 here? What are the factors of negative 3? So the factors for negative 3, if we think about it, it's the same. Before going into this, so when I say that the factors are 1 and 3, it's the same. So I can say that 3 is equal to 1 times 3. Okay? Agree with that? Okay. So when we think about negative 3, going back to negative 3, what are the factors of negative 3? So the factors of negative 3, what happens with this little symbol, negative symbol, is actually saying that the factors of this negative 3 are negative 1 and 3. In other words, I can write this as negative 1 times 3. So this negative 1, what it's doing to this 3 is actually throwing it to the other side. Boom. And locating it here. So that's what this negative is doing. Agree? So when I have a positive number and I multiply by negative 1, it lands on the other way, on the other side of the number line. It lands in the negative side of the number line. So it switches the number from positive, from being in the positive side, the 3, and throws it all the way to the negative side, and it's negative 3. Okay, if we're clear about this, now let's think about what happens if I have something like negative 3 times negative 1. If I have something like this, so that means that it's going to go further into negatives. That makes no sense. So it's not going to make it even further. So that negative 1, what is going to do, if I draw my number line here again, so I put my 0 in the middle, and then my positive 1, 2, and 3, and my negative, I'm going to do them with green as well. Negative 1, negative 2, and negative 3. So I'm starting in this case with negative 3. Agree? So I'm starting here. And then I'm multiplying times a negative 1. So what that is going to do is that it's going to throw it to the other side. And it's going to land on the positive side. So negative 3 times negative 1 is going to be equal to positive 3. It's going to land here. So every time that we start in the same way that when we're adding and subtracting integers, we start with whatever number is telling us in the number line. And we see that it's timesing a negative number. That means that it's going to throw it on the other side. What happens if I'm timesing times a positive number? So if I have something like negative 3 times 1. So in that case, because there is no negative, it will remain on the same side. So it won't not throw it to the other side. So it remains negative. So I have it, my 0 here, and my negative 1, my negative 2, and my negative 3. And because I have this one is starting here, the negative 3, and if there is no negative, it remains in the same spot. In the same way, if we think about it, if I had positive 3 times 1, we know that the answer to this one is 3. So the same thing. In my number line, I start here. I have 1, 2, 3. Let's roll the negative. Negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. So I'm starting in the positive and I remain in the positive. We know that the answer to this one is 3. And as I said before, the answer to this one is negative 3. So now let's look into multiplying integers per se. So we're going to do 4 examples that is going to give us our 4 cases when we're multiplying integers. So let's look at the first one. The first one is the one that we already know, the one that you have been doing since primary school. So 3 times 4. So I'm multiplying 2 positive numbers. This is going to give me 12. Agree? Now let's look at this other case. Let's look at 3 times negative 4. Okay, I'm going just to, I have a negative here. Agree? So as I said, I'm starting in the positives. 3 times negative 4. The magnitude of this multiplication, so the value is going to be is going to be 12, the same as always. But the question is it in the positive side or in the negative side? So because I start in the positive and then I have a negative, it's going to throw me to the negative side. So that's going to be equal to negative 12. Okay? I have one negative, and that means that my answer is going to be negative. Okay, let's look at another example. Now, let's look at this case. If I do negative 3 times 4. Okay, so what is happening in this case? Again, here I have a negative, so I'm starting on the negative side of the number line. Then we're timesing by 4. By 4 is a positive. That means that I'm going to remain on the same side of the number line. So my answer is going to remain on the negative 9. Therefore, my answer is going to be negative 12. And lastly, the last case that we can have is if I have negative 3 times negative 4. Okay, in this case, I have a negative here and a negative here. So I am starting with negative 3. I am on the negative side, and then I'm timesing times negative 4. So that negative is going to throw me to the other side. So in this case, my answer is going to be positive 12. So if we summarize this, and this pattern is going to happen every time that we will multiply integers. So our rules are the following. And these are the rules that we're going to use every time that we're multiplying integers. So every time that I have a positive number and I am multiplying it by a positive number, that was the case that we had here, what do I get? A positive number. Okay, Now, if I have a positive number times a negative number, what I'm going to get, so I start in the positive, I times it to the negative, it's going to throw me to the negatives. So it's going to be equal to a negative number. Now, if I have a negative number and I'm timesing it by a positive number, what is going to happen? So I'm starting in the negative, I'm going to times it by a positive, I remain on the negative side, so it's going to be equal to a negative. And last case, if I have a negative times another negative, it's going to be equal to, so I start at a negative and it times it by another negative is going to throw me to the other side, so I'm going to land in the positives. Okay, so if you look at this, you can see if I have the same signs twice, I have a positive. Oh, sorry about this mistake. I don't know if I can rub out here. I don't think I can with this one. I think I have to do this. That's fine. Positive. There we go. So if we look at this, if I have two positives times into two positive, I end up in the positive side. If I have different signs, then I end in the negative side. If I have the same sign twice, then I end up in the positive side. I'm being very careful to saying twice because I want you to, and you're going to do with your questions and your exercises to see what happens when you times it 3 times. What is the pattern? And trying to define what happens there. Good.